Hi everybody, my name's Samuel Valenzuela, and my group, which is it's me and Tradish Hill. Anyways, we talking about the postmodern approach, and with that is that we'll be talking about the therapy that's in the postmodern approach, which is solution-focused brief therapy. Anyways, before I begin with this presentation, just want to let you know that I thoroughly enjoyed um, learning everything about this approach. I found out it's more realistic than the other approaches because excuse me. Excuse me. Anyways, because I think there are many clients out there that want to go into therapy uh, to get help, but they don't want to be in therapy for years or even months. Um, Anyways, many clients also don't want to go to therapy just to be told about what mistakes have been made. And many of these clients want to, um, they want so much to improve on their future. Um, that future may be difficult for some of them, but at least they're going to be reminded that by their therapist that they possess the ability and the skills to make the changes that will allow them to function in society and also in their um, personal relationships. Um, Also, before I begin, I must inform everybody here that I'm not a licensed therapist. I am not. So please be conscious of that and please refer to a licensed therapist if you should need assistance. So, anyways, again, I found this approach quite fascinating overall. Um, I love this technique for so many reasons. As I go through this presentation, I think you'll also like the simplicity and the effectiveness of this approach. SFBT was created by two co founders, and surprisingly, they were husband and wife, a team. Um, and The first one is Insu Kimberg, and the other one is Steve DeShazer. Steve DeShazer was actually born on June 25th, 1940, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he was born to an electrician and an opera singer. Um, he was actually Mr. Shazer was actually a professional uh, jazz uh, saxophonist. You know, he played the saxophone. Anyways, before starting his career in psychotherapy, he graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison and continued to attend the same school, pursuing his master's degree in social work. It's pretty interesting, if you ask me. He and his wife would go on to establish the Brief Family Therapy Center in Milwaukee in 1978. Both he and his wife were social work majors, and from uh, the literature and biographies that I looked at Mr. DeShazer, he did struggle um, with the existing forms of therapy. So he decided to pursue another angle. Sorry, tongue tied today. He wanted the therapy to not only be brief, but also to focus on positive things that existed in the client's life, to build on those positive points of, um, I'm sorry, instead of leering on what happened in the client's past. Um, what happened was the couple they tweaked the approach through several years until 1980, and then they were able to um, finally tune it to the point where it was they were both satisfied with it. The approach um, wasn't officially named until 1982, Um, Steve DeShazer passed away in 2005. Um, so here, there is a direct quote from his wife, Miss Kimberg. Um, After passing of her husband, when she was interviewed, that she was actually interviewed that and asked about that defines SFBT. She stated that I think the reason we spend so much time developing this model has to do with wanting to show professional people how to be respectful of the people they work with. That is what I consider very holy. Again, that's what Miss Kimberg said. That was her own words. Um, so when they tune up to this approach that Steve the Shazer and his wife Miss Kimberg, who had come up with, was based on the principles of social constructionism. Social constructionism places a strong focus on the way social context um, affects reality, including the client's emotions and their relationships with others. This form of therapy will aim at a target to find the solution. So again, go straight to the solution. We don't focus on the problem all the time. It goes straight to the solution. Excuse me. Anyways, it focuses on what the client is looking for by going into treatment or therapy rather than uh, what even led them to seek therapy. Excuse me. Mr. DeShazer wanted the clients to always um, direct his or her attention to the future and not linger on the past, even if it kept even if it kept the even what I mean is if even if the steps towards achieving that income uh, came in very small steps. The basic assumption of the theory are very simple. The first assumption is that this approach is based on optimistic assumptions that people are competent enough to find the answers to their own problems. The next assumption is that that complicated situation do not require very complicated solutions. And so you see how that kind of works. So along with SFBT builds on strengths and resourcefulness of the client. It also promotes changes from within the client. Another assumption is that the vision of reality belongs to the client and not to the therapist. Sorry, excuse me. It also promotes uh, a new how you say it, life of meaning that leads to change. Um, the main assumption then is that the client knows what the client needs. Um, there is an old saying that comes to mind when I think of SFBT, and that is, um, trying to remember, actually I got it. Sometimes you can't see the forest because of the trees, and what this tells me is that sometimes a client is so like involved in their own problems that the solution is right there in front of them, but they can't see because they're basically they're blinded with the problem and the emotions within with the situation. So it's right there in front of them. So the solution is. But anyways, excuse me. Um, the key concepts that are essential to this theory are solutions rather than obstacles. Empowerment of the client to overcome major problems that the client is facing. The therapist sees um, as being knowledgeable and competent enough to find solutions to his or her problems. The other concept that is a major part of SFBT is if it's not, or if it's working, don't mess with it. Or if it isn't working, try something else. Um, the other key concept, refers to change. Change is, it's not avoidable. Change leads to solutions. Um, the last concept that the client will allow the client to lead instead of the therapist acting as if she or he is all knowing. So, in other words, the therapist is not leading the session, the client is. So it's kind of almost a role reversal, if you will. But anyways, so now let's talk about the important goals of SFBT. There are one, allow the clients to set reachable and realistic goals for themselves. Two, respect between client and the therapist needs to be respect so that trust can be flourished. Three, therapist and the client need to work together on setting these goals. Or, I'm sorry, just setting goals. Sorry. Four, allowing client to identify their limitations and what their quality of life is as they see it. And five, allow the client to view their present situation from all angles. And six, ensure that there is an understanding that the therapist and the clients are equals. The therapist just provides guidance and promotes empowerment. Excuse me. So the relationship between the client and the therapist and SFBT, it's vital to the success of the therapy and, of course, the client. The therapist should strive to carry out therapy with the client and not on the client. The client should not feel like a project, for the therapist, rather than the therapist must create an environment where the client makes or can make changes. Excuse me. Anyways, the environment that the therapist should be an atmosphere of understanding and acceptance. The client should not feel at ease, and should not feel at ease, and there must be trusting relationship, between the client and the therapist. The most important relationship between the therapist and the client should be the one where the client can feel that he or she is the expert on their own lives. It's not the therapist that is an expert on the client's entire life. No, the client knows its own life, their own life, he or she's own life. Anyways, only the client can make changes that are needed based on client's acceptance that there is a need for change. The therapist needs to focus on strengths and resources that the client possesses and not dwell on what the problem is, but rather than how can the client make the needed changes. The therapist and the client should always collaborate with each other towards a client generated goal, so the client can be successful in the end. Anyways, the techniques from the model that the therapist must use are the following. One, pre-therapy change. The question that needs to be posed to the client is, what have you done since the time that the appointment for therapy was set, and has that had an impact on your problem? Two, exception questions. Um, Client needs to be asked how their life was, before the present problem, or the problems impacted their lives. Three, ask the miracle question. Um, how will you know when things are better or have improved? Four, this is a four is the most interesting one I've ever read and heard about. So four is homework. What events is the client trying to see more of in their future? Positive events, you know. And five, summary feedback. The therapist needs to identify and inform client of what strengths and the client has used to make the changes that are identified by the client and the therapist. And six, what is the client trying to achieve by participating in therapy? That's a good one if you ask me. And seven, focus on the future and not the past. That's a big one. And eight, focus on positive things occurring in client's life now, and don't linger on problem that brought the client to therapy. So anyways, we'll move on to Tradicia's part of the presentation, and she'll take it away. And take it away, Tradicia.